story of what happened on that fateful night. Sunday, April 14th, had been a day of leisure aboard the Wonder Ship, with New York still 3 days away. Bride had been transmitting routine greetings from Titanic's wealthiest travelers. But incoming signals warn of heavy ice ahead. Other ships report that they are changing course and slowing down to avoid crossing the danger zone at night. Captain E.J. Smith steers the Titanic slightly southward and then goes to dinner. But the biggest ship in the world is still steaming at close to top speed. At 11:35, on a clear, calm, moonless night, the Titanic meets her destiny. Lookouts spot an iceberg just ahead. Immediately, First Officer William Murdoch orders a sharp turn and slams the engines into full reverse. It's a fatal mistake. The iceberg scrapes along the length of the Titanic. In the radio room, Harold Bride and colleague Jack Phillips do not even sense the collision.
I didn't even feel the shock. I was with Phillips when the captain put his head in the cabin. We've struck an iceberg, the captain said, and I'm having an inspection made to tell us what it has done to us. Now, you better get ready to send out a call of assistance.
Captain Smith has asked ship designer Thomas Andrews to go below to assess the damage. Already there is water in the cargo holds, and now it's flooding into boiler room number 5. Panic. If cold water reaches the furnaces, they will explode. Andrews returns to the bridge with his dreadful news. The ship has less than 2 hours to live. Calmly, the captain orders the lifeboats to be uncovered. Lifeboats with room for fewer than half of those on board. Bride and Phillips make their first distress calls using a new international signal, SOS. The Carpathia promises assistance, but it will take her 4 hours to sail 60 miles through the ice fields.
Phillips told me to run and tell the captain that the Carpathia had answered. I did so, and I went through a mass of people to his cabin. The decks were full of scrambling men and women.
The Titanic is beginning to tilt forward. There is 32 feet of water in the hold, and time is running out. Stewards are ordered to awaken and organize the passengers. Steward James Etches arrives at the stateroom of millionaire Benjamin Guggenheim.
I put a life preserver on Mr. Guggenheim. He said it hurt him in the back. There was plenty of time, and I took it off, adjusted it, and then put it on him again.
Gallantly, Guggenheim and his assistant help women and children into the lifeboats.
Mr. Guggenheim would shout out, "Women first," and he was of great help to the officers. What surprised me was that both Mr. Guggenheim and his secretary were dressed in their evening clothes. "We've dressed up in our best," replied Mr. Guggenheim, "and are prepared to go down like gentlemen. If anything should happen to me, tell my wife in New York that I've done my best in doing my duty."
But some decline to be saved. Ida Strauss refuses to leave her husband. She and her beloved Isidore sit hand in hand while panic and confusion rage all around them, awaiting their fate. The devotion of Ida Strauss remains a deeply moving chapter in the legend of the Titanic.
Coming up, the Titanic succumbs to icy waters, taking the lives of 1,500 passengers. Next, as Lost at Sea continues.
Fatality. Flares are shot off and seen by a ship just 5 miles away, the Californian. But its captain does not recognize the flares as a distress call, and so tragically does nothing. The beleaguered Titanic lowers 16 lifeboats to the freezing water, but several are swung away only half filled with first-class passengers. For the third-class immigrants trapped on the lower decks, there is no help, only chaos. Was deep within the Titanic. She felt the iceberg immediately.
We were standing on the steerage, third class they call it, and we couldn't get up to second. And of course then there was one man with us, and he was our guardian angel, and he said, for God's sake, let the women up. And I had to go to first cabin. Lifeboats were only going from first cabin. So there was a man on the second deck, and he asked me to go on his shoulder, and I climbed over, and then I think it was the last boat that was going out.
Kate is one of the few immigrants who will survive to follow her dreams. In the Titanic's elegant salons, confusion. John Jacob Astor confronts Captain Smith, who commands him to get his wife Madeline into a lifeboat immediately. Astor asks to join his wife, pleading that she is weakened by her pregnancy. But the officer in charge will not permit any men in the lifeboats, and Astor declines to use his immense wealth to pull rank.
Colonel Astor said to me, the sea is calm. You'll be all right. You're in good hands. I'll see you in the morning.
John Jacob Astor will never see his young wife again. His body will be found floating a week later. By 1:55 a.m., the Titanic's stern is high in the air, but 1,500 people remain aboard. 10 minutes later, the last of the lifeboats is lowered. Harold Bride and Jack Phillips remain at their post as water begins to flood the radio room.
I will never forget the work of Phillips, the last awful 15 minutes. Then came the captain's voice. Men, you have done your full duty. You can do no more. Abandon your cabin. Now it's every man for himself.
Their work is done. No radio message can bring salvation now. Still, many men like railway tycoon Charles M. Hayes of Montreal are certain that the Titanic cannot possibly sink. After helping women and children into the lifeboats, Major Archibald Butt returns to the smoking lounge to engage in one last hand of cards. Another man seen in the lounge, alone and silent, Thomas Andrews, head designer of the Titanic, will die with her. At 2:18 a.m., with 1,500 passengers, officers, seamen of all classes and creeds still on board. The mightiest vessel ever built surrenders to the North Atlantic. The final moments are witnessed by Harold Bride, who has been swept into icy waters.
The ship was a beautiful sight then. Smoke and sparks were rushing out of a funnel. The ship was gradually turning on her nose. The band was still playing. I guess all of the band went down.
All that remains is the calm, flat sea, a few lifeboats, and the pleas of the drowning. The cries of the dying continue for hours, echoed by reverent voices from a lifeboat lost amid the chaos and debris.
Coming up, the
The survivors find themselves in a macabre wonderland of ice. At 4 a.m., April 15th, the Carpathia begins her distressing rescue task. She's prepared to take on 3,000 people, but finds only 15 lifeboats, carrying 700. Survivors are numb from shock and cold. The Carpathia's captain offers his own quarters to Madeline Force Astor. Bride has broken both his feet in his miraculous escape from death. Yet by day's end, he will be back at work in the Carpathia radio room, transmitting names of survivors. Florette Guggenheim, the final chapter is written on Friday morning, as steward James Etches tells the heroic tale of the last moments of her husband's life.
Shortly after the last few boats were lowered, I was ordered by the deck officer to man an oar. I waved goodbye to Mr. Guggenheim, and that was the last I saw of him.
Guggenheim's infidelities will be forgiven. His honorable death will render him a hero to his family and the nation. 16-year-old Kate Gilnow is reunited with her sister Molly. They have a photograph taken to reassure their parents back in Ireland. Vincent Astor continues to believe that his own father somehow made it to a rescue ship. But the following days bring the death of all hope and the grim business of bringing home the dead. The coroner ship is dispatched from Halifax, Canada, to retrieve bodies. The Mackay Bennett sails with a full load, 100 rough pine coffins and 100 tons of ice. Her crew finds corpses still dressed in evening clothes, many bloated beyond recognition. Even in death, the first-class passengers are given the best treatment, embalmed and lain in a coffin. The others are placed in canvas bags or buried at sea. The ship of the dead returns to Canada. An ice rink is turned into a morgue filled with boxes, each with 3 bodies. Some will be claimed by families and taken home. Many others will be buried in Halifax, ending their voyage in the soil of Canada. One of the seekers who arrives in Halifax is Vincent Astor. He retrieves his father's body, identified by a platinum ring and $4,000 found in his pocket. In New York, John Jacob Astor is eulogized as a hero. His reputation has finally been restored. The mystery of the French children is finally solved. They are returned to their mother in France. The children have been kidnapped by her estranged husband. At Astor's own Waldorf Astoria, the Senate inquiry begins. J.P.Morgan's man in New York, Philip Franklin, presents his version of the events. Bruce Ismay, the British head of the company, escaped in one of the lifeboats. He's condemned for not going down with the ship, as did so many. The inquest also condemns the Californian and its crew for failing to rescue Titanic. Its captain, Stanley Lord, finds his reputation ruined by the disaster. In England, another inquest condemns the company's hunger for speed and luxury and its fatal inattention to safety. John Pierpont Morgan never sailed on the ship his ambition created, but the disaster destroys him as well. He is condemned by the U.S. government for his attempts to monopolize key industries. Weakened and exhausted, the wealthiest man in America dies in 1913. On April 15th, 1912, 1,500 souls were sacrificed to a dream of luxury and speed. Today it is believed that Titanic's great weakness was her steel. Made brittle by the cold, it sprang hundreds of leaks after the fatal collision. But from the disaster came a precious legacy. New laws for lifeboats, better radios, proper ice patrols, and a new future. Vincent Astor inherited $78 million, then sold off his father's Waldorf Astoria hotel. It was demolished to be replaced by an enduring symbol of the 20th century, the Empire State Building. Kate Gilner lived in New York City until the age of 75, telling and retelling on radio and TV the story of her miraculous escape from death.
Oh, yes. I was looking at it sinking when we were in the lifeboat, because we were in the lifeboats for 9 hours.
And then which ship rescued you?
Carpathia.
Benjamin Guggenheim's inheritance was passed to his 3 daughters. Peggy used her share to establish the famous Guggenheim collection of modern art. Guillermo Marconi saw wireless become one of the 20th century's first mass media. David Sarnoff, the radio operator at Wanamaker's department store, founded the National Broadcasting Company, NBC. Few ships have touched the lives of so many so profoundly. Still, the Titanic inspires all, lying broken at the bottom of the ocean, an eerie, eternal testament to the limits of human ambition and the power of the sea.
This week, a city thousands of years in the making.